the Three Gorges Dam, which was again a mega project in China, which had which had dishoused a lot of people onward to Shanghai. So that was one of the project. And okay, I think I'll stop here.
Okay. Thanks, Tushar, and sorry for hurrying you up. Parthiv, if I could ask you to come back here. Well, I just have selfishly, I'll hog the first two questions and then open it out. One of the questions I have for both of you, and thank you, Gayatri, for setting up such an interesting kind of dialogue between Tushar and Parthiv. Tushar, sorry, I'm going to throw this one at you, but in an interview you gave to Tehelka magazine in 2011, you said that when you came back from the International Human Rights Academy in the Netherlands.
Human Rights Academy? The Reichs Academy.
Reichs Academy, that's what they printed it as, the International Human
Must
Rights.
Must be a misquote.
You were disgusted with the art world, and you thought it was, art was equal to navel gazing, and you became an activist. I'm bringing this up only because in conversations...
I don't think I became an activist. I don't think I qualify for a label like an activist.
That's interesting, because that's the question. And Parthiv's own reluctance with labels, that's one of the primary kind of conversations that we've been having where Parthiv says, but you know, what am I doing here? He's reluctant to call himself an artist, he's reluctant to call himself an activist or even an art activist. And in this then, how do both of you identify with this business of aesthetics towards addressing a political or a social concern, and how do you even define art activism, or activism through art, or art practice as activism? And what is the relationship between art production and other more kind of conventional or recognizable forms of political resistance or protest? And again, I mean, Parthiv, for instance, the photographs of Hussein that you showed, we have some here. So at the time that you made them, it was a personal dialogue with M.F. Hussein. It was a very sort of personal project. At the time that they were attacked in the Sehmat exhibition, it was the act of vandalism which turned the image into an act of resistance in some ways. Otherwise, they may have remained more neutral, perhaps, other than, of course, the inclusion in that space or in that exhibition. And then to use that object, the damaged object, the torn photograph, and pick it up as it is, not reprinted photographs of Hussein, which are showing now in the Smart Museum. So really just this question of how, I mean, what do you think about this term art activism? Why art? Why employ various aesthetic strategies, whether it is through, or would you call it art at all? So.
Frankly, I don't care if it's art or not. I think everybody has to contribute to society, and you can't just live and not do anything that can affect or impact anything towards the betterment of some sort. And also, I mean, I don't want to be part of this kind of development of the city or whatever, and I don't want to be part of this. So if I feel something is wrong, I just feel I have to do it. And I feel anybody has, and everybody has to do it. And just because I'm not equipped to do anything else, have done my bachelor's and master's in art, so I am an artist, so to say. So I have to do it through this medium, but I mean everybody, even a chartered accountant or a doctor or whoever has to do these kind of things. So just because I am an artist, so-called, I do it through this medium too.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think when you start, there are two ways of looking at this. One is that when somebody does certain things, and when it's, like you were talking about label also, that where it is displayed, it also makes a huge difference. And when I said public domain, and you know, when you, let's say, I'll just give you an example of Calico Mill Museum. You know, it's a Calico Museum in Ahmedabad. It has a certain hours, it has a certain days. So it's so difficult if actually somebody wants to go and visit that place. It's very, very difficult. So an average person who just want to enter that place, first of all, it doesn't look, you know, from outside, you can't say that it's a, you know, you can even enter that place. It's a very overpowering structure. There are lots of guards outside. The gate is shut. So the museum where you can't literally enter, it's one of the best museums. That's a separate issue. But what I'm saying is that to enter a gallery or a museum, it's very difficult situation for a lot of people. So when I say public, I say mass. And that's where, when you do it outside, you are actually public domain. When you are going outside, Here, public will have to enter.
So
So there is a difference between that how many people literally come here, though this is a kind of a central place in Rabindra Bhavan, you know, and it's not in Okhla or Noida or Gurgaon or wherever it is. Still, an average, you know, person, how many people they enter this place. But if you actually bring the art there, or whatever you want to call that, lot more sort of reaction you can get or interaction happens. So, when adding to what he's saying that everybody has to contribute to this, I'm not bothered, you know, where and I was discussing that I gave in fact a talk, and throughout my and probably again the Eames imagery comes because his work now, or Armin Hoffman's work is in Modern Art Museum and shown as an art, you know, piece. But when Eames' chair was designed, it was not kind of art piece, you know. It's over the years it sort of brings that kind of a label, and that label is people like you give actually, who are curators and art historians, and I suppose people who work, they are, when they themselves want to do it, great, but I don't feel interested in that.
Right. Well, talking about spaces then, when you talk about projects, whether it's a project like when you rode from the Sardar Sarovar Dam into Tibet, through Tibet, it was for a particular project, for an exhibition, and again, it was a different exhibition in the Vadehra Gallery here. Your photographs, when it moves into particular sort of art world spaces. I'm interested in how does it happen, how do you kind of distill experiential or processual sort of engagements into objects or documents that are then exhibited? I mean, how do you make these choices that you're going to show it to able to communicate these projects to art audiences? And this actually comes from a conversation I had with Gayatri where, I mean, I was proposing that the commodification of art practices that address political or social concerns, when they come into this art world, we've got to think of then their relationship to even funding or patronage. Patronage, of course, is not just the person who's paying for the project, but also the people who are coming in, the audience, the idea of reception then. Gayatri came up with a very interesting proposition. She said that she feels that the political has also shrunk to exclude market forces and capitalist systems in many ways, as positing the political as being a sort of act of resistance only against that. And in a sense, it has to kind of define and resist that space, and yet the artist, she said, is as an individual constantly kind of trying to reach over this division when the work moves into these spaces, out of the public domain, if we were to go with your sort of talk. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say, but yeah, one can't not look at the commerce totally. I mean, where is the bread going to come on the table otherwise? You know? And we don't have any kind of funding from state or whatever. So I mean, you have to produce some work that can sit in the gallery, maybe, or you know.
And I think that is what Gayatri is suggesting. We tend to think of commerce or a certain sort of exchange of an object, let's say, as bad or evil. So I'm really asking, how do you, I mean, what is the aesthetic vocabulary? How do you arrive at that for projects such as yours?
I just want to sort of carry forward that thing is that there are 2-3 ways of looking at this. One is that in my most of art practices, or whatever you want to call it now, is, let's say, this Narbada work which I'm doing. I have not been funded by anybody. I'm just doing on my own. So the thing is that I do some other work to get myself some money which I can travel and do something with it. And so it's not sold. That work is not for kind of gallery in the sense. If it happens, great, but that's not the first idea. And so some of the work, I think it works like that. You know, you don't. Only problem is that when I don't believe in something, but if that issue is in vogue, and as an artist or a designer or whatever, if I start working on that issue, but I actually don't believe in it, I wonder, you know, that how does it work? Because any social cause, you need to believe in that. And the danger is that many a time you might get into that because it's in vogue. So that's, I question actually sometimes. I don't know, I'm sort of answering you.
Questions? We have, I think, 3 or 4 minutes. Jivesh.
I'm just interested in, because in this kind of long processes, you may lose your belief. You may enter a process, and because these are really highly transformative spaces, you know, you're dealing with something that you don't know of, it's something that will... But I'm just interested, do you encounter a loss of belief in your ideas of the world, the where you are coming from, or maybe the capacity of your own way of producing the image? Just curious about that.
If in all the 3 projects, I mean, the 2 projects which are photo-oriented, and in fact one earlier, the mill one, which ways of resistance, images are actually built upon from my book. They're all, again, long-term association or my growing up. Ahmedabad, the city I grew up, so I have like 10, 15 years I've spent on that. I started shooting mills in 1983 and the book finishes in 2003. So, 83 to 2003. It's like that. For the Narmada thing, I've been going there for last 8 years. So it's not something which I just do it and next year it is in some, book or an exhibition or something like that. So most of my project, at least, I have a certain kind of association with it, and it also connects with my childhood, my life, my work, my other things. It's not just... So I feel that I'm quite, of course, attached, but then there is a familiarity there. There is some kind of dialogue between my, I don't want to call them subjects, but, my people whom I deal with. I don't know, I'm making it clear.
Because, I met a writer in Ahmedabad, he said a very nice thing once. I was just asking because you... Yeah. I was asked the question because both of you deal with processes in long term. You don't do short term things. So he said a very nice thing. He said, Ahmedabad is a very unesthetic experience now. The word now was interesting. So I was just asking, because you deal with 30 years of a space, and 30 years is also very different political demographic shifts have happened. In that sense, does the structures, the mills, the spaces, the objects, do they communicate you in the same way, or you have a loss of belief in... belief in the sense, because you use the word, I don't use it much, but loss of the power by which your image could be constructed. In that sense, I was saying. Because in Tushar's case, it is very clear. The Bombay becomes a space that has to be, the attachment has to be searched. It is not given. And in that, you produce various different strategies to search and create an attachment for yourself. And that may be the problem of how to produce that. But in your case, it was reversed. That's why I was asking.
Yeah. Well, there is, just to add to that, there is also the point is that I try very consciously not to make it something very picturesque in the sense, not very beautiful in that sense. It automatically sort of gives in the frame because, or whether it's a stark thing, when the person's house is burned and that man has lost everything and he's standing there, like in a, in Saudhan Mudra. How to make it also when somebody views it, should not start liking that image, so that's also a tough thing. So when you are talking about the loss of aesthetics in the in Ahmedabad and the way things are growing up, and the city is building up, or even the other political sort of thought process which is happening there, of course there is a loss, But I have been since, let's say, 1989, I don't live there. So I only am a visitor there. So.
If I can answer that, I feel my practice is fraught with totally self-doubt and totally losing belief all the time. And I don't know, I keep questioning myself forever about what I do and the kind of images I make or whatever I do, whether it's of any relevance anyways.
I forgot to mention also in Tushar's biography that you're part of the core faculty at the Shivnadar University, and how you would then take these concerns into a kind of pedagogic space, and also that sort of doubt. I mean, there's something to be said about doubt, I think.
I know, but I think it's okay to be a little vulnerable and to have doubts, and I think it's okay. And I basically Yeah, you have to keep introspecting and questioning yourself, I think, and it's okay if I can pass that on to the students that I'm going to be interacting with.
Three.
In Bombay, perhaps the word, did you use the word attachment, Jibesh? That attachment has to be, you have to find the attachment, it's not going to be given to you, you know. I would say perhaps the vulnerability is a given. I'm referring mentally, you were talking about what is the aesthetics of, what is the aesthetic line of inquiry that your practice can encourage you to look at. I'm thinking of a video like the mill closure work of Tushar, where the mill slowly, all the cotton looms spin slowly, and we see that the entire factory now is vacated and it becomes a derelict site. Now, there will always be the movement in Bombay between such structures and then the publics that have been evacuated, because obviously, I mean, it seems to me that it's not a question of attachment. I think I imagine that there is almost a compulsory vulnerability, because between these two poles, what are the answers? This dereliction, the building, the constant act of renewal, and the area, and your sense of disgust and withdrawal from it. You said, I'm not interested in this kind of city development. And then there is this human factor, which is churning and is never stable and is never going to settle into anything. Perhaps that site of vulnerability is a given. I don't think you can get away from it.
Any more questions before we are evicted? None? Thank you so much, Tushar and Parthiv, and thank you, Gayatri, also for setting up this very interesting proposition.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.